is shot dead while walking with his wife.
You were on your own on the beach with Mr. Garwood when the gun was fired.
And when she confesses, Neville has doubts.
I'm not entirely convinced it was Ms. Reeves that did it.
Death in Paradise.
Saturday at 8 on WTTW.
On the Mallorca Files, Max and Miranda investigate a theft on the set of a reality TV program. But when things go terribly wrong, Max can't help himself.
You wait until the train negotiators arrive. Clean up!
Hi.
The Mallorca Files.
Saturday at 9 on WTTW.
Embark on a journey to discover the beauty and richness of Latino culture at the 37th Virtual Chicago Latino Film Festival, April 8th through April 18th. See new and exciting films from throughout Latin America, Spain, Portugal, and the U.S., all from the comfort of your home. Also, 3 drive-in events at Chi-Town, presented by Corona Extra and sponsored by WTTW. For information, visit ChicagoLatinoFilmFestival.org.
WTTW programming originates from the Renée Crown Public Media Center.
I hate the myth of Hemingway. It obscures the man.
His talent is stunning.
He went against the grain.
In order to have something new to write, he had to have something new to live.
Hemingway, the man, is much more interesting than the myth.
Coming soon to WTTW.
On Masterpiece.
Margaret Schlegel monopolizing my father. She always meant to get her hands on Howard's End.
You too feel lonely.
Horribly.
I've had you here on false pretenses. I am asking you to be my wife.
Howard's End on Masterpiece.
Sunday at 8 on WTTW.
Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Illinois public health officials announced an immediate expansion of vaccine eligibility. All state residents 16 and over are now eligible for the vaccine in counties where demand is dropping. State officials say they've seen a slowdown in demand in certain areas with unfilled appointments and increased vaccine inventory. Governor J.B. Pritzker says the expansion comes as there are worrying signs of a resurgence in COVID cases.
We want to avoid a surge, and so we've tried to jump on top of this as fast as possible, making sure we're not only vaccinating more people, but that we've got teams that are going to the regions of the state where this is happening.
And state public health officials report 3,000 new cases of COVID-19 and 33 additional deaths. That makes for a statewide total of 1,232,000 cases since the start of the pandemic and 21,203 deaths. The test positivity rate ticks up to 3.3%. The embattled CEO of Loretto Hospital gets a vote of support from the hospital board's vice chair, who also happens to be an Illinois state senator. State Senator Kimberly Lightfoot is defending George Miller, saying there are no plans at this point to let him go. Miller apologized for his role in reported improper vaccination events off-site, including at his suburban home church. On Wednesday, top executive Dr. Anash Ahmed, who was reportedly tied to many of the improper vaccinations, including at Trump Tower, resigned. And at an unrelated news conference today, Senator Lightfoot gave Miller high marks.
Mr. Miller is one of our best presidents that we've had. We've worked really hard to develop relationships in and all around the community so that we can continue to provide quality health care to our Austin residents.
And we'll have much more on this in just a moment. Chicago police officials are raising alarms over shootings at pop-up parties throughout the city. Another person was killed early this morning at such an event in the Ashburn neighborhood. This follows a deadly mass shooting last week in Park Manor. According to the AP, the city is on pace to see higher homicide numbers this year than last year, when the city recorded 769 total homicides. That was a major jump from the 495 the city recorded the year earlier. And joining us now are Mary Mitchell of the Chicago Sun-Times, Robert Sciarrito of Block Club Chicago, Christian Farr of NBC5 Chicago and Gregory Pratt of the Chicago Tribune. Let's get right into it with the ever-developing Loretto story. Rob Sciarrito, your outlet, Block Club Chicago, has reported so much on this. This week, the executive at the center of the firestorm, Dr. Anash Ahmed, resigns. Is that enough to quiet the firestorm here about improper vaccinations?
I don't think so. I think there's still a lot of questions that have to be answered. Mayor Lightfoot has called for an independent investigation. We'll see if that happens and what comes out of that. There's still a lot of stories that we're looking into, potential stories, and I know all our competitors are as well. It's been 10 days of a lot of stories that just seem to get a little more interesting by the day.
It's been a fire hose of stories there, Bob. Mary Mitchell, you heard State Senator Lightfoot defend the CEO, George Miller, who still has his job. Should he keep his job?
Well, you know, first of all, I cannot understand how she can come forward and say he should keep his job. At what point do you hold and who do you hold accountable if it's not the CEO, if it's not the person who's running the hospital? It is not the CFO. It is not the COO who is in charge. It is the CEO. So he has to take responsibility. And for her to come out and defend him just really makes it to go to show you that the reason why all this happened is because they have a very weak board. A strong board would by now have cut ties with both of the gentlemen and sent them on their way.
Christian Farr, when you look at Dr. Ahmed, who has resigned, the CFO, the COO, you know, a $2.7 million condo in Trump Tower, apparently, according to these Block Club reports, living the high life with $180 steaks at the steakhouse that he vaccinated, lots of jewelry. Does that raise questions about just what the executive compensation here is at this very small community hospital, as Mary mentioned, serves the neediest residents?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the biggest problem right there. Loretto's on the west side, and we see that a community has been truly impacted by COVID, black and brown people. It's been reported not just here in Chicago, but nationwide. And to see that you have events at a jewelry store, at a steakhouse, at a suburban church, when you're not having events within those communities to vaccinate those people that truly need to be protected from this, because essentially they are on the front lines. These are essential workers. They have to keep on working to put food on their tables. And just to repeatedly see each and every day, Block Club did an awesome job in their coverage on this. And we followed up on this, going to those locations, my colleagues did. And it was just disturbing just to hear what had happened, where you're vaccinating people who were not in line. You know, all of us are waiting to get vaccinated when we're appropriately supposed to get vaccinated. And then to have this happen, I mean, there's even the question about those judges as well. It just raises a lot of red flags about what happened here.
Right, you're talking about Cook County judges that kind of jumped the line, so to speak, and got vaccinated at Loretto Hospital. Greg Pratt, today, the mayor, and yesterday and today, the mayor got kind of testy when asked about some aspects of the vaccination at Loretto Hospital. Can you kind of delve into that a bit?
Well, the mayor denied that anybody at her staff had given a list of names to Loretto to vaccinate, which is one of those rumors that's out there, you know, and our colleague at NBC, Marianne Ahern, asked about it, and the mayor was very upset and said that's BS, and, you know, and she did not use the polite version of it, and people thought that it was a bit of an overreaction to a fair enough question. And you had a situation where the mayor was very defensive about that, because for her, she has been strong in recent days about criticizing what's happened at Loretto and talking about how they need to come clean with the public. So you can somewhat understand her frustration, but there, you know, the fact that a question like that is out there, though, really speaks to kind of the circus atmosphere that has started to surround Loretto, which is unfortunate for a lot of reasons.
And Bob Sciarrito, you mentioned that you know, there are other tips you're looking into. What are the next shoes to drop here in this story?
Well,
he's not going to
what you can't tell me.
Can't really say too much.
Those are those secrets.
We should mention you were also Mary Mitchell's former student, so I'm sure she taught you well.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
I mean, we'll see what pans out.
Yeah, but what's interesting here is it's not just what's the next shoe that's going to drop. It really is what's going to happen to Loretto, period. When these guys have moved on down the road, when they have taken, when they finally let go of George Miller and let him find someplace else to go, what's going to happen to Loretto Hospital? Because it took so long for that hospital to be built up and to be accepted as a credible alternative in a neighborhood that is underserved by a lot of hospitals because people there don't have insurance, they don't have money, they may have issues of substance abuse and those kind of problems that they're trying to deal with. What's going to happen to them? And that's the part that really discourages me about this story and concerns me about this story is that when we get finished telling all this about Loretto, what's going to happen to that?
Well, Mary Mitchell, I want to pose that question to you, though, too, about executive compensation, because you mentioned that in your article, the former CEO in 2017 was making between $800,000 and $900,000. Is that appropriate salaries at a small community hospital that relies on Medicaid and Medicare to treat the neediest patients?
Well, I looked at some of the websites where they and the organizations that keep track of that sort of thing, and it appears that if a hospital for Loretto's size, a hospital that has $49 million, let's say, in assets, that person makes, that CEO makes $247,000 or somewhere around there a year, and not $800 and something thousand. So the salary seems to be really out of whack, and you have to ask yourself, well, if he's making that kind of money, what are the resources within the hospital? How much resources does that hospital really have?
And by the way, you know, Loretto has talked in recent years about having to cut millions of dollars because they're not getting Medicaid reimbursements. They've threatened to close down in the past. So those salaries tend to raise a lot of red flags. Let's move on to another vaccination story. Greg Pratt, the city immediately yanked away a contract from a company that was vaccinating CPS employees for what they say are misallocated vaccinations. That company, Innovative Express Care, says they were doing no such thing. Where's the truth here?
Well, they don't necessarily say they didn't do no such thing. They sort of say that, and then they say, yeah, we gave some vaccines to other people, but they needed it. Is more or less what they've made the argument, that they didn't turn away CPS people, but that at the end of the week, when they were done with when they had other vaccines coming, they gave it to people that needed it and people that were eligible, which of course is admirable, but you know, in an abstract kind of way. But if your contract is to vaccinate CPS people and you're taking those vaccines and giving them to anyone else, that's not the deal. And the mayor has been pretty outspoken about saying, oh, you know, they're not telling the truth. They're not being straight. They're twisting it. And it does seem from what they're even admitting publicly that they felt they could take Chicago public schools vaccines and give them to other people as long as they were deserving. And that's more or less what they've said, as I understood it. And obviously that's not okay by CPS or by Mayor Lightfoot standards.
And what they say was there was a miscommunication on that. And Christian Farr, this comes as the mayor and the schools chief have set basically the end of this month, the next 5 days, to vaccinate everybody. Do you think that that will actually happen now?
I just don't think so. I mean, look, you've got a lot of tension between CPS and CTU on just trying to get back into school, trying to figure out how you're going to vaccinate everyone has become a huge issue here. And I mean, you know, the thing is that we should be very careful with these vaccines. I've done reporting with people who were eligible to get the vaccine but can't make an appointment. And so when you see stories like this, you wonder, well, what is the system? How is it set up? People can't get this vaccine. And what are they supposed to do when you have so many routes to go? Do I go to Walgreens? Now they're becoming more available. You know, it's really disturbing when you see stories like this with Loretto Hospital, as well as with this CPS story as well. It just raises a lot of red flags that this was just not rolled out the way it was supposed to be.
And I should mention that Loretto Hospital has defended some of their actions by saying that the vast majority of their vaccines have gone out to residents on the West Side. And the vaccines in question here are several hundred in a pool of about 15,000. That's what they're saying. Let's move on.
We don't know that to be the case, though.
Right.
Really
go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, that's what we know about.
Right. And transparency is an issue too.
So, Bob, what do you think the real numbers are?
I don't know, but I don't know that I trust them to report it.
Certainly, yeah, certainly a lot of confusion around that. Let's move on to Governor Pritzker. He got his COVID vaccine on camera this week, and during that event, he expressed concerns about infections going in the wrong direction. Take a look.
Even as we have addressed the mitigations and tried to lower mitigations here or there, I've said we got to be careful about the variants. And I am concerned, I must tell you, as I see numbers go up. Is that the variance, or is it a blip in the data? What is it exactly? So we'll keep watching very closely. But I can tell you there is more activity going on, and I think people maybe are being a little less careful. And I want to remind everybody, please keep your distance. Please continue to wear your mask. Please be respectful of others.
Mary Mitchell, we see those numbers inching up again. You see in Europe, they're in a full-blown third wave. Is that where Illinois is headed?
Well, I hope not, but people are weary. They're tired of being locked up. They're tired of being at home. And because we are talking about vaccination, and a lot of people have had at least one shot or something, so they want to be out and about. So I think we've been a little loose with the mask wearing. I was out the other day and I saw people without a mask, and it's been a long time since I've seen that. You've seen from all these gatherings and pop-up parties, something that we're going to talk about, but if they're having all these pop-up parties, again, that's how the virus is spread. So I just think that we are inching in the wrong direction. Now, what puzzles me is if we're doing that, if this is happening, then why are we opening up more or trying to reopen if we're not being successful right now with containing the virus? Why are we doing that?
Well, Greg Pratt, the state is close to 70% of seniors being vaccinated, which is the threshold that Governor Pritzker has set for the bridge phase to fully reopened. Is that bridge phase still going to happen?
Well, I think that they're close on one of the metrics, and on a couple of other metrics that they've got a little bit of ways to go, is the way I understand it. I think they're really struggling, the political leaders and society, with the fact that, cases go up, deaths are relatively stable, and, death is what concerns them more than people being sick, although obviously sickness is a problem. And they're also dealing with the fact that places are really struggling financially. The mayor was asked about, is it a mixed message to tell people, hey, the virus is going up, you need to do better. And by the way, we're expanding capacity outdoors. And of course, outdoor is different than indoors, but it's absolutely a mixed message. You can hang out with a lot more people outside, just don't do it inside. People don't necessarily hear that, right? They don't hear or think about the outside-inside distinction. But we're between a rock and a hard place. There are not a lot of easy choices, and they'll probably be teaching ethics classes about some of the decisions that are made.
It's a tenuous situation right now, although it seems like, as Pritzker said at the top of the show, lots of counties have some vaccine surpluses, so everybody over 16 is eligible right now in certain counties. They have to go to certain counties. Let's talk about some of the other news of the week. Lawmakers demand changes to gun laws after a rash of national and Chicago shootings. After Evanston passes a first-of-its-kind reparations fund, Chicago City Council also debates the subject. Mayor Lightfoot proposes a boost to the number of affordable homes while taking aim at the city's entrenched segregation problem. And Senator Tammy Duckworth demands Asian representation in President Biden's cabinet. First with you, Christian Farr. We've seen a rash of shootings of police officers in the last couple weeks. We see the numbers now that homicides in general are up this year over last year, and last year was a terrible year. Do police officials have any explanation for the surge?
They really don't, but there's a great deal of concern that police officers in some cases are being targeted. A couple of weeks ago, did one at a police district where an officer had a graze wound to his lip. He was just outside when that happened. There was a large police response. Luckily, he was okay. The next day, an officer who was off duty was involved in what was a carjacking. And that was a really tough situation where officers responded. You know, in the more than 10 years that I've worked at NBC Chicago and covered shootings throughout the city, this is the worst I've seen it with police officers. I mean, to have, you know, 2 back-to-back and then in less than 2 weeks, the numbers that we've had, you know, there's just a lot of concern about, you know, are police officers being targeted? Are we dealing with these gun laws enough, the guns on the street? And then, you know, you have these parties where you end up having mass shootings, and, you know, something has to be addressed. And, you know, do you throw more police at it? You know, you don't know. And that's sort of what the issue is right now. And I think they're just trying to figure it out.
Well, Mary Mitchell, we talked about the party early this morning, late last night, and in Park Manor, a mass shooting a little over a week ago. What is the danger with these pop-up parties? Why are these becoming such an issue right now?
Well, first of all, they're illegal. They shouldn't be doing it. That's first of all. But then the other thing that sticks out with me is that shows how many guns are on the street. You can't go to a party without someone getting into it and then having a shootout. So there are a lot of guns on the street. The other problem, and my biggest concern, is that if we're having citizens shooting citizens and mass shootings in which now we're treating 8 people getting shot and one dead is like a good thing and not a really, really bad thing. It could have been 8 people dead. And then we have 4 police officers shot in 2 weeks, and we don't know what to do about it. We don't know how to get a hold of it. We don't know what is the responsibility of the citizen in a case like this. Should we all have our eyes open and we see a gathering or a pop-up party? Should we be calling 911? We don't know what to do to stop it, and that's the scary part.
Yeah, and these pop-up parties are becoming dangerous for participants, but also for police officers, as Christian mentioned. And this comes amid another mass shooting in Boulder that follows the mass shooting in Atlanta. Some talk at the national level of some sort of gun control measures in terms of expanded background checks or a ban on assault weapons. These things get talked about at the national level. Bob Sciarrito, do you see any appetite or momentum to get it done?
No, I'll believe it when I see it. I think it's been talked about many years, although we do have a Democratic Congress this time, so there might be a chance. But like I said, I'll believe it when I see it.
It seems to be one of those things that in the Senate, the filibuster would have to be looked at for anything like that to pass. Greg, you did a story today about Mayor Lightfoot earning $350,000 from her former employer, Mayor Brown, the law firm that she was a partner in. This is during her first year in office. How is it possible she was making that income?
Well, unfortunately, the mayor's office simply hasn't responded to that simple question. And it is a very simple, basic question. And I have given them, at this point, 46 days to answer it. And they just didn't do it. And which is really unfortunate because she can answer it very quickly. She knows why she got paid that money. If I was guessing, it's not nefarious, and it's an issue where it's just the way they structure the payouts for partners when they leave. Right. But the issue is that they're just not answering the question, which is really inexplicable. Actually, it's really kind of an amateur hour move. And she said she's divested from any stakes in that company, a big law firm, big company. Christian, also this week, Evanston passes the nation's first reparations ordinance. Remind us how it works.
So back in 2019, the city council in Evanston had passed reparations, and so it is broken down. And so this last vote that they just had was how to just take care of 4% of it. So it's being funded from tax revenue from marijuana sales. And this was the housing part of it. And it's very specific. You have to have lived in Evanston during a certain time period in certain parts of the city where they had redlining that was going on. So, I mean, it's hugely monumental because they have reparations on the books, which is not something that is prevalent someplace else. So, and they're making great strides in doing this. They voted on it, put a committee together, spent a lot of time all the way through COVID speaking to the community. They're getting a lot of national attention. There is some pushback as well. And there's also the threat of a lawsuit. But the fight continues. But, for right now, it's just 4%, about $400,000 that they're going to start doling out.
What would the
to 16
lawsuit
families.
be about?
So it's from a conservative law firm. It's just the threat of a lawsuit. They're calling it unconstitutional at this point, that you can't give benefits based on race. Now, the alderman who's backing this up, Alderman Robin Rue Simmons, who serves the 5th Ward, it's predominantly African-American, it's been predominantly poor, and she grew up there and is really sort of at the forefront of this fight, says she's talked to the city's law department, and they don't have any fear from this law firm. That's a conservative law firm out of D.C. that just sent this letter to them, I think, earlier this month.
Mary Mitchell, this comes as City Council now looks at this and starts to form committees to talk about what reparations could look at the city level. Is Evanston a model for what Chicago could do?
It could be a model. I mean, when you think about it, this is monumental. I mean, we're talking about reparations, and I came into the newsroom 30 years ago. They were talking about reparations, and every year after that, people were talking about reparations. Activists talked about reparations, but it never got past the talking stage. It never got back to a real committee. It never got to this is what we're going to do. So it's not an end-all and be-all. It's a small step, but it's a step in the right direction. So I'm just really thrilled, and I think that it could be a model. If Chicago would just actually sit down, the city council sit down and consider what needs to be done.
What is City Council considering, Greg Pratt, and what would the mayor consider?
Well, that's a great question, because the mayor doesn't go in on a lot of these cultural touch points. And so it will be interesting to see if she ends up coming out in favor of it in some way. The city council, Alderman Sawyer, the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, scaled back some of his plans that he was working on before, in part at the encouragement of the mayor's office. So it will be very interesting to see if this can generate momentum and how it'll work. But when it comes to universal basic income, when it comes to things like reparations, the mayor just hasn't really gone there. And in Chicago, if the mayor's not going there, the city council doesn't really have the juice to do anything. So we'll see what happens.
All right, well, you've all brought the juice tonight, but we're out of time. So our thanks to Mary Mitchell, Robert Sciarrito, Christian Farr, and Gregory Pratt. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then 6 p.m. Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And some of the stories we're looking at: can industry coexist with healthy neighborhoods on Chicago's southeast side? Plus, as Evanston makes history passing a reparations ordinance that we talked about, we look at the local and national outlook for similar efforts. And then Chicago Tonight is back at 7 o'clock next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A.